Good evening, everybody, and welcome to CCKF On Air. This is our second episode, and we're going to have Seth Mycko with us again. We're also having another guest, and David, and I'm going to say Belkoski, and he's going to correct me when he comes on because I'm sure that's probably not right. Both they're from different districts in North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission, Fisheries Biologists. And got some interesting topics tonight, some things that you guys mentioned that you wanted to hear. So we're talking about bait fish and behaviors and patterns of bait fish, and might have a few things about Jordan Lake specifically because we've got a tournament coming up Saturday at Jordan. I hope everybody signs up for that. Real quickly, I want to share our upcoming schedule. I'll do it with the Facebook schedule. So, of course, tonight we've got the CCKF On Air. Saturday we've got the event at Jordan Lake. Launch and lines in at 6:15 and lines out at 2:30. Weigh in at 4 o'clock at the old Wilsonville store on the corner of 64 and Farrington Road, or I guess the other one's called Beaver Creek Road. But it's the intersection right there at Jordan Lake with the stoplight. It's got gas stations all around it. There's a Hardee's on the corner. Anyway, we've got that Saturday. And then 8 days after that, on the holiday weekend, we're doing a Wildcat on Sunday afternoon at Lake Wheeler. So looking forward to those. It's funny, I haven't done this enough to really learn the software and all the buttons to click and everything yet. With that, if you guys have any questions or anything to bring up during the broadcast, just go ahead and post them. I already see that Alex Sterling has said hello. So I'm going to go ahead and bring our guests up now and let them kind of introduce themselves and talk about just kind of introduce what they're going to talk about tonight, and we'll go from there.
You guys to do this for us, and I think we got some good topics to cover. I guess David's a new face to most folks. David is we have two biologists in each district, and I'm in D5 with currently a vacant position in D5 as well. And David's over in District 3. Their biggest reservoirs are Gaston and Harris. So they cover those two. And Falls as well, yeah. So see if I can share my screen here and we'll get into the goodies. Share screen. All righty. So today I know you guys got a tournament coming up at Jordan. So we'll cover some of our recent data. We actually did a survey at Jordan last year on the largemouth population at Jordan Lake. And we'll cover some largemouth bass prey sources specifically for Jordan, but mainly statewide resources that we have for largemouth to eat. And we're really fortunate to have a lot of different things for bass to eat around here. So that's good for all you bass fishermen out there. So let's see here. There we go. So if anybody missed me last time, my name's Seth Mycko. I'm here in District 5, which is basically the north central Piedmont from Davidson County over to Durham and up to Virginia border. Mycko, Mayo, and Jordan are our biggest three reservoirs. Originally from South Carolina, went to Clemson University for 6 years. A break in between bachelor's and master's there, and I'm a former collegiate bass angler. And I'd like to call myself an angler now, but I'm more of a donator these days to the Cat Trail winners and our little club here in Alamance County. So, but I'm learning. I finally caught a limit on Saturday, so we're getting there. And I'll let David take over from here and introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm David Belkoski. Like Seth said, I'm the D3 Fisheries 1 biologist. We spend the majority of our time on Harris Lake, Falls Lake, and Lake Gaston. We did help install the fishing trail at Lake Wheeler. And during the spring, we do most of our anadromous sampling on the Tar River. And I went to my undergrad at Virginia Tech, worked for Wyoming Game and Fish out west for a couple years, worked at Auburn for a couple years, and then just finished my master's at UNC Wilmington on flathead and blue catfish.
All righty. Well, let's get into Jordan here. David will be back with us for the talk at the end of the presentation on Jordan, but this is a little off right now. We have a vacancy in District 5, so I'm all by my lonesome right now. And District 2 has since changed a little bit. Ben Ricks is now the supervisor there for the Coastal Plain, so District 2 is only TD. So going through a few changes right now in fisheries, but all the well, it's doing pretty well. Last spring in April, we did Jordan Lake. And I'm sure many of you guys out there know that Jordan was ranked number 8 in the 2021 Bassmaster Magazine Top 100 Lakes. It was number 8 out of 100 lakes that I think they have a whole metric system that they use to go through and rank different lakes based on tournament results and number of fish over certain pounds and that kind of thing. And so that was cool to see, a lake that I work on pretty frequently in there. And in our surveys, 9.3% of our fish were over 19.2 inches, which is pretty stout. And we calculate what's known as a catch per unit effort. And it's basically the number of bass that we catch in an hour of electrofishing pedal time. And at Jordan, it was 67 fish per hour, which is pretty good. It's middle of the road, which is good because if it gets too high, we might be worried about an overpopulation issue. And if it's low, we might be worried about, some sort of recruitment problem. So 67 to 80, 60 to 80 is a good range to shoot for CPUE for sure. And we caught 11 fish per site. So we do 10-minute sites along the shoreline, and over 10 fish is always great to see at any lake. So that was awesome to see there at Jordan. And 6.5% of the fish we caught was over 5 pounds. So that was really great. But we did not catch any official trophies, which according to the scientific literature is any fish over 24 inches. And, it's called electrofishing, so we're not seeing all the fish in the lake. And those big giant fish, their muscle physiology is so dense that they don't really get stunned like the little 2 to 3 pounders do. And like you'll see them and they'll come up real quick, but then they'll jet away from the boat. And that's something we deal with, as far as not collecting like the biggest fish in the lake there. So this was our size structure, and you can see that 22.7% of the fish in Jordan were over 18 inches long, which is pretty good. And we don't really use weight a ton. Length is a lot more important to us because we're catching them at different times of year and different times in the spawn. So we don't want to compare over time with weight because, they can be different weights before the spawn versus after. And if we get them at different times of year, it might affect our data. So we use length more than anything. But I did go through and grab the weight for you guys. And the average weight of a 5-year-old bass in Jordan was only 2.6 pounds, which is a good steady growth. And a 10-year-old fish was the average weight of a 10-year-old was 4.29 pounds. And we do what's called a von Bertalanffy growth curve for these fish. And it's basically, in statistical terms, it's called a regression model, where we can estimate how big a fish should be at a given length. So, we like to see just a good steady curve to that maximum length there.
What method are you using to determine the age of the fish?
So we do have to sacrifice some. We take what's called an otolith out of probably about 20% of the fish we catch, 15 to 20%, and we take those back to the laboratory and we put them under a microscope. And every day they lay a daily ring down on that otolith, which is a part of their inner ear, and it tells them where they are in the water column as they move around. And every day those rings will lay on top of one another. And in winter, when they're growing slower, those rings will be spaced far apart, and you can see that. So we'll call those areas where they're spaced far apart, we'll call that a year. and we'll
Right.
count the number of years on each otolith. So we collect, probably between 150 and 200 otoliths per lake, because we're usually catching, 400 to 500 bass per lake, so 20% or so. But it's good for us for some of our lakes where we have a stunning issue. We could have 5 to 7 year old fish that are only 14 inches long, and we definitely want to look for that. So it really helps us look out for issues that might be brewing out there. And I was able to go back and look at our last years of surveys. So we went back to 2014, and Jordan's just been steady. CPUE's been right there in that 60 to 80 range. 80 was pretty high, so that was cool. And we calculate what's known as the preferred size of fish, which I can't quite remember exactly what it is in inches, but it's, probably like a 16-inch fish. So in Jordan in 21, 60% of the fish in Jordan were in that preferred size range, which is awesome. So it's been variable over time, which is normal to see, but yeah, it's just good in that good middle of the road range. And the length of the age 2 fish was right there where it should be, in that almost 12-inch range. So, and relative weight is what we look at, which is basically a metric of how much they weigh versus how long they are. And 100 is a good target to shoot for, and Jordan's always right there hovering around 100 in relative weight, which is awesome to see. So Jordan is doing just fine right now, as I'm sure most anglers would agree. They've been fishing real good this year. We've seen some big tournament bags come out of that lake. And one question I always have for anglers, I'll pull out our top 5 that we catch. So our largest potential stringer out of that lake was 38.25 pounds. And does a 40-pound stringer live there? I don't know. It probably does. That'd be cool to see if we can ever go back. We do these lakes every 3 to 6 years, so maybe we'll go back and get a 40-pound stringer one day if we can really, really hit it at the right time of year. And I would agree with Bassmaster Magazine right now that it's one of the best lakes in the country. It's not many lakes out there where 24 pounds doesn't get you a check. Which
that first year that MLF came, I think it shocked. I think all of those guys were shocked. Jordan, Falls, and Harris. But it's funny that it seemed like Jordan and Falls showed out more than Harris. During that they fished Jordan 2 days and Falls 2 days. And I remember I had press passes through the Carolina All Out TV show.
Okay.
I was filming for them and talking to those guys. Andy Montgomery, I had a clip of Andy Montgomery. It said, "Man, the fish's lips weigh 5 pounds." And they all just really had good things to say about all 3 fisheries.
Yeah. I think if we really, timed our surveys great, we've got a lot going on in the spring typically, but if we ever hit Jordan right, we'd really see what we can catch there. And I think there's some big ones right now. So this is really important for fishermen here. I went and grabbed our best sites, which was basically where we caught not only the most fish, but the biggest fish of the survey. So it was probably about a foot high when we were there that April. And the back of Bush Creek, where all them bushes are, if you turn left into the back of Bush, there was a lot of big fish back there. And the causeway there at the Bells Church Bridge, not the main 64 causeway, but that Bells Causeway was a really good riprap area for us. And then all the way down near the dam at Poe's Ridge, where there's all that backwater on the other side of the island, that was a really good area for us. And then there's a main river point right there that drops off real quick into the main Hall River. That was, I think, our biggest fish of the survey came right there off that point in early April. So, and I'm sure right now they're probably maybe coming out of these areas. They should be wrapping it up and moving out by the time you guys get there Saturday, I imagine. So you might have to fish a little deeper for them versus what these sites were, because we were probably there when the water was in the low 60s.
Yeah.
So
I know at that Hall River point in that general area, there's also a hump there that I see a lot of people deep fishing, off just about every side of that hump. So
yeah,
I'm looking at some.
And I saw let's see, is this my last slide? That is my last slide. So I saw the question about hybrids on there.
Yeah, I can display. I figured out I can display the comments. So Joey was asking if there's an update on hybrid possibilities at Jordan.
Yeah, so we're working closely with DMF on that, and the biggest issue with stocking hybrids at Jordan is they get out of the dam real easy. So if they get out of the dam and into the Cape Fear proper, they can interfere with the anadromous striped bass coming from the Atlantic Ocean and interfere with that spawning. So we're in talks with DMF and working on hopefully getting something done at Jordan here in the next few years. So, but I'm not going to swear to that, but we are working with DMF on the potential of stocking hybrids again in Jordan.
And Jason was wondering, how does Falls compare to Jordan in some of those stats?
I don't know. I wonder, that might be putting David on the spot a little bit, but I wonder if he knows the general sense.
Let me bring him up.
I would imagine Jordan's doing slightly better right now.
We didn't do any ages last spring when we did Falls, and our biggest fish was a 6-pounder. We were getting 3 and 4s pretty regularly, but we didn't see any of the large ones that they were seeing on Jordan. I would say Jordan is definitely the king of the triangles right now.
Yeah, for sure. I assume Brian's talking about Pose Ridge, trying to keep you away from there.
Yeah.
So Jordan's been producing lately, but I imagine the fishing pressure is gonna eventually catch up to it. I see the 3 Raleigh lakes changing and ebbing and flowing as far as fishing goes. As one gets hit very hard and one gets left alone, maybe they'll trade off throughout the years, I'd imagine. But Jordan is definitely probably king of the roost right now as far as tournaments go.
Have there been any predictions or projections, or even have they given any thought yet to the population boom in this area that's going to continue? It looks like it's continuing with Apple coming, with the VinFast, or the electric car plant is going to be right there at Jordan and Harris. So I'm assuming, we're getting more and more population. And I'm assuming with the increased population, increased pressure on the lakes.
Yeah.
And so is anybody looking forward to try to figure out how to deal with that yet? Or is that something we have to deal with as it comes and we actually see the effects?
Yeah. Luckily, we're fortunate in that no one's keeping bass anymore. And hooking mortality is likely making up for a lack of fishing, fishing harvest. So I'm hoping that one offsets the other, in that, the occasional fish that gets hooked wrong and dies, maybe that'll just keep up with people not taking fish home anymore. And as far as it turning, like the fishing pressure side, I don't know if there's anything we can do about that.
Right. Yeah.
As far as people just getting out there more. And we'll just have to play it by ear. Luckily, it's such a productive lake. There's so many nutrients in it. Hopefully it just keeps pumping out big fish year after year. And
now, you guys probably don't even have this information. I would assume this is maybe more Corps of Engineers type information, but I wonder if there's ever a possibility of raising the lake level, permanently, making the normal lake level 2 or 3 feet higher, bringing all of that brush and stuff on the sides. Now it's kind of gone.
Yeah,
it's been flooded for so long. I wonder. And the MLF guys, they were fishing it when it was 5 and 6 feet high, and it was just incredible for them. But it might boost it for 5 or 10 years if we raise the level 3 feet, I guess. But
yeah, it would definitely help the fishing. For sure. Me and David actually got out there one day when it was about 3 foot high and had a pretty decent morning. Jordan's unique in that it's not only flood control, but it's water supply.
Yeah.
So that's an issue they fight during summer is, all that water going out of the lake and into people's homes. And that'll definitely be something that DWR, the Department of Water Resources, will deal with. And just hopefully we continue to get some good rains every spring that bring it up. But they try to maintain that 216, I think it is, 216 feet.
Yeah.
That's the best for bank stability, and that's what the Corps is worried about is just, keeping all the water where it should be and not losing a lot of bank. When it comes up, the banks erode real easy, and they don't want to deal with those issues. And the state park doesn't want to deal with those issues at the campgrounds either.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stakeholders there and a lot of water leaving to go for drinking water, and just a lot of different balls in the air at Jordan Lake for sure.
Well, I don't see any more. There's no questions. So if you guys are ready to move on to
and if anybody wants this data or wants like a quick summary of it, I can email it out to them. If they just want to email me, say, hey, send me those slides or send me whatever you want to see about Jordan, I can get it out to you. And I know last time we talked about our vegetation work, and now we have a schedule for our 2022 vegetation work. Nice. So if anybody out there wants to come help us plant some plants, get dirty, get in the water and plant some aquatic plants with us, some native aquatic plants. We wouldn't be doing any hydrill or anything like that, of course. You can take a screen grab of this, and these are where we'll be at any given week, weather permitting. So lots of work at the Greensboro Lake.
The yellow highlights?
Those are the lakes that we need the most help at. So gotcha. Tuckertown especially, and my Greensboro lakes over in Greensboro. And then that first week on Harris will be a big push to get plants in the water.
Well, I know after the first chat, several people expressed interest in helping with the aquatic vegetation. And several people were like, man, I want to go on those electrofishing trips. So,
we definitely get a lot of requests for that.
But guys helping. So
it's harder. Our electrofishing boats are so small; it's hard to get a lot of folks out on those. But these are the projects we can really get a lot of boots on the ground with, and just let us know. Email me or email David or call us if you want to be involved in any of these weeks, especially these first 3 weeks here at our Greensboro Lakes and Harris and Tuckertown are where we're going to be doing a lot of good stuff. That'll eventually help. It's probably a 15-20 year goal, but hopefully we're doing some good out there for our bass.
Well, we have you're doing it during the week, right? That's a Monday.
Yeah, these are all weekdays. That's right.
Yep. So I was just checking to make sure if it went over a weekend, we have a tournament on the 11th, but I'm sure we're going to have some guys with some availability between the 6th and the 10th, and we have a lot of guys that love Harris, and I love to hate Harris. So but we do need to. I'll definitely get a day or two that I can come out there and help. We definitely need to. Get vegetation back in Harris, in the right kind of vegetation too.
Maybe one day we'll hit a home run with one of these species and just get it going at Harris. But the native plants are definitely a lot slower than the invasive plants are.
So I know that I saw, interestingly enough, we talked about carp a little bit at Harris the last time, and I had actually seen, so the North Carolina Bow Hunters Association, they do carp tournament. They do bow fishing tournaments where they go target carp and things like that. So one guy was saying he was actually going to try to get in touch with them and try to persuade them to bring one of their bow fishing tournaments to Harris to help get rid of some of the carp so they'll stop eating the
Yeah, that would be awesome. The common carp in there are so thick. You see them right after the largemouth spawn. It's illegal to shoot the grass carp right now since they're stocked fish. But there's so much common carp in there, like any removal would be amazing.
the carp spawn at Harris almost makes me not want to fish, because when you get in those coves, that's all you hear. You know, the carp hitting, the carp hitting, the carp hitting. So
Yeah.
So I'm actually a member of the North Carolina Bow Hunters Association. So I thought I would actually, whenever whoever said that made the motion, you know, I'm like, second, let's do it. But I don't bow fish. So
yeah, common carp are becoming an issue, I think, but something
They
we'll
definitely muddy up the water and dig up the plants that we're trying to get rooted. So it's counterproductive, and they're not. I haven't seen any, you know, massive ones in there like we see on Gaston. But the numbers are just insane.
Yeah. We don't plan on doing much with carp anytime too soon, but maybe that's something we can look into down the road, is figuring out those issues and how to somewhat control them.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot at Mattamuskeet right now with carp removal. They do advanced bluegill stocking right where the carp are spawning, so that they nest rob the carp and lower that recruitment, and eventually over time, you know, combined with removals and the advanced bluegill, sometimes you can have an effect on them, but it's tough to get them once they're established.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, you want to get into the meat of today's discussion? What are our largemouth out there eating? So we actually, North Carolina State had a student going on, it's been about 4 years ago now, and he did a whole survey of prey species specifically for striped bass. His project was focused on striped bass and comparing lakes for striped bass. But part of that was lake morphology and prey species in 11 lakes statewide, all the way from Hickory. I think he had Hickory and Lookout Shoals, Jordan, Gaston. Basically, if it had stripers in it, he looked into it, and he found that the mean catch per unit effort, like we discussed earlier, came out on top for gizzard shad. Of course, you know, all these lakes are pretty shallow and dirty, so them gizzard shad just thrive in that habitat. And threadfin are a close second. We'll discuss why that is in a minute. And there were a few of our river herring species that showed up, which is probably Lake Gaston is what's representing the alewives and the blueback herring. And he didn't really look into the bluegill or red ear sunfish too much, because he wasn't focused on largemouth bass for his study. It was only for striped bass forage, which striped bass are probably not really eating a lot of bluegill or anything like that. So basically, these are all our forage fish for largemouth. Of course, there's gizzard shad, which has got to be the number one. Threadfin shad, which they prefer the warmer lakes and the larger lakes. So it seems to be, especially in D5, all of our small lakes that are, 200 to 700 acres don't really have threadfin shad in them. They want them warmer and larger surface area. And our river herring, they're less common, and they're usually introduced via fishermen releasing them from their bait buckets. Is usually how that happens, from live bait releases. And then, of course, you got your bluegill and your red ear, which are probably the top two sunfish in most lakes, especially the smaller lakes, the sub 10,000 acre lakes. And then occasionally you'll get red breast sunfish, green sunfish, and pumpkin seed in a few reservoirs. But definitely the bluegill and the red ear are the king of the sunfish in a reservoir in North Carolina. And I think this is public now, so if you just Google Stephen Parker NCSU, I bet that this would be the first thing to pop up. It's a big master's thesis, so it's several pages long and real good to look at if you ever want to. And we'll get into sunfish first. So, like I said, bluegill and red ear are probably the two best, the two most frequent and abundant sunfish that we see. And they're actually not native to North Carolina, or red ear aren't native to the entire state, and bluegill aren't native to the Roanoke drainage. So they were first observed in North Carolina in the 40s and 50s. And the only true native sunfish in North Carolina are our pumpkin seed sunfish and our red breast sunfish. So I actually just learned this yesterday and had to teach myself this. And I was looking at those maps. I was like, well, North Carolina's not even on that for red ear, but I see them everywhere. So that was cool to see. I think the theory is that agriculture brought them in for fertilizer is the working thesis on bluegill, but they're definitely good bass forage. And bluegill and red ear, as everyone hopefully knows, they're a game fish in North Carolina. You can only keep 30 per day. So if you ever go bluegill fishing, you only keep 30 per fishing license with some exceptions. And I took a screen grab of, probably can't see that too good, but these are the exceptions for bluegill in North Carolina. They they spawn, of course, everybody knows the bluegill spawn is probably starting here real soon. These full moons and hot water, they'll start spawning in those aggregate groups. They'll build a lot of beds in shallow water. And they are a shallow water obligate species, so they rarely ever venture deeper than about 5-10 foot of water. And bass jigs, if you're throwing a jig, you're usually imitating a bluegill. A lot of fishermen don't realize that. You're rarely ever, if you're throwing it in open water or dragging it in open water, you're probably imitating a bluegill more than a crawfish, So that's bluegill and red ear. You got any questions on those fish, Mitch? I'm sure most bass fishermen know the deal with bluegill, I think.
Yeah, I don't have any specifically. I just showed the comment. Mark Carmody said that he caught some big red ear at Harris yesterday.
Okay.
And he said he's also said that it looks like 6 foot seemed to be the magic depth for those. I'm assuming for those red ear that he caught.
Yeah, so they're moving off a little bit, but not too far off the bank. And bluegill are actually red ear too are beneficial for carp because they're a nest predator. So they'll go on the carp nest and eat carp eggs and do stuff like that. So that's good to have them around. And we'll move on to our shad. I'm sure everybody wants to hear about shad. So threadfin are not endemic to any of our eastern states, not even Alabama. So we have non-indigenous up to invasive, so they'd be considered a non-indigenous fish species to any of the eastern states. They'll get up to about 6-8 inches. They'll be 4 to 5 at about 3 years old, and I doubt there's many threadfin making it past 3 in many lakes. And they'll spawn. Of course, everybody knows about the shad spawn. If you've ever been fishing a lake around docks, in early May, you've seen shad spawning around shallow cover, and that usually happens.
Well, I'll tell you this: we fished White Oak Creek.
Okay.
So the Bells Bridge, the Bells Pier, we launched there at the Bells Pier Sunday, and it was day, it was sunrise when we're going out, and I'm like, I've been around Jordan Lake my whole life. I know there's no running water at Bells, but as we got close to that pier, I was like, what is that? And it was the shad. It was unbelievable to look up under that pier, up under that dock.
Yeah.
And the water just looked like the water was boiling.
Yeah.
And fish the whole day, fish were busting all over. We stayed in that area. We went out, to the main, we went under the bridge and went out to the main channel, and we fished over there around the old section over there that's closed down, the boat ramps and the old beach and stuff over there. But everywhere we went, fish coming, a foot out of the water because they didn't want any of the baits we had because ours didn't look as good as the real thing, I guess. But man, there was shad everywhere. You look down in the water, it looked like, if you just stuck a dip net down in the water, you were going to catch them. So
it can be discouraging because sometimes they have so much natural food. It feels like they don't want your spinnerbait. They're like, oh, I got all this shad over here. I ain't going to bite your spinnerbait. So I've seen it happen like that. But yeah. And they really hate cold weather. So anytime that water gets below 42 in the winter and stays there for a long time, that's when you can have your shad, your threadfin die-offs. That's not affecting the gizzard shad too much, but 42 seems to be about, from what I gathered we're searching a few literature articles, that was the temperature of the
we
minimum
saw a
threshold.
huge, but this year and last year both. We start fishing around February, and huge shad die-offs at Harris.
Yeah.
I mean, huge, just floating everywhere, birds everywhere, scooping them up.
Yeah. Yeah, and as long as there's several hundred left, there's probably millions of shad in most lakes. As long as there's several 100,000 left after that, they'll bounce back. With a warm winter, they'll do just fine. So that's why we see them, be cyclical through time. And it seems like, from what I've gathered, 42 is the magic sustained number for that to start to happen, which is becoming somewhat rare. I think 42, getting down below 40 in wintertime, is not every winter, I don't think. So that's good for threadfin. But sometimes a lot of shad can be hard to fish. If they have all that natural bait down there, it can be a struggle. And the threadfin, they're always after food and they're always after warm water. So Mycko is a prime example of threadfin having both of those things. Mycko stays a little warmer, so the plankton usually grow pretty good. All winter and all summer they grow really good. So there's a ton of threadfin in Mycko, and that based on how the wind's blowing or how if they're running water out of the plant's flowing, they'll be just in that flow, just feeding in that warm water, and they love it. So Mycko is a great lake if you want to go fish around some threadfin shad, and that's why smaller baits are probably better at Mycko, because there's more small threadfin in Mycko versus many other lakes that we have in D5.
I've never fished there. So
yeah, it's a larger population, I think, of slightly smaller fish. There's some good ones in there. And it's more expensive to put a boat in there. It's about $25 a day, or you can buy an annual pass. So somewhat of a barrier to entry there, but still a decent lake.
And just the one boat ramp that I'm aware of, right? Is it just one?
Just the one boat ramp here at the campground. Yeah.
So the
power plant is right in here. That's where the plant is. So there's hot water coming out of there in the wintertime. In a kayak, it's probably 15, 20 minutes with an electric motor, maybe 25 to get to here from the ramp. So yeah, that'd be a good wintertime lake usually.
Jason Dickerson says that smaller baits worked best last time he fished there.
Yeah. Mycko, I think I've been to all of our D5 reservoirs now, and Mycko definitely takes the crown for D5 threadfin for sure. We actually hit it this year right during the shad spawn, and there were threadfin everywhere from the dam all the way up. So they are. I'm
gonna go back and hit one question.
Okay.
Jason was asking, when you guys are electrofishing, are you looking at anything besides bass? Are you looking at flat and blue catfish, or is it a bass focus?
Yes, so the catfish species are easier to get at with gill nets.
Okay.
And we're usually using gill nets in late fall and early winter to get our catfish, because they're usually a little deeper in the water. So electrofishing is not the greatest tool in a reservoir for those. And in a river, it's a whole different story. You can use electrofishing boat very easily for catfish.
Okay.
But yeah, in a reservoir, we usually use gill nets in deep water, like 20 to 35, 40 feet. And at Gaston, I think they really keep an eye on the blue catfish there. David, David, you're doing a lot with catfish, aren't you, right now?
Gill nets for the blue cats there. With the electrofishing, we're using high frequency electrofishing, which is smaller pulses. And so we're only really seeing fish at a max depth of maybe 8 feet, 8 to 10. Sometimes you see them down there, but you can't really roll them effectively. We can use low frequency electrofishing, which are longer waveforms. And it really works well on those scaleless fish, like the catfish. On the coastal rivers, that's where we use that low frequency electrofishing. And instead of having droppers out the front, like you see the shock boat that has the droppers out the front, that's really just putting electricity in 6 to 8 feet of water. We can run a cattail out the back that's insulated, goes down about 40 feet. It's insulated, and then at the end, it's open. And so that long wavelength is running from the end of that tail all the way back to the boat. It's those long wavelengths, hits the flathead and the blues down deep, and they'll slowly roll up. And that's how we're getting them on the coastal rivers, is low frequency electrofishing. But with low frequency, we don't see any scaled fish. Every now and then we'll see a gar, but for the most part, we don't see any bass or sunfish. That's really only high frequency electrofishing, and you need that generator on the boat to put that juice in the water.
Yeah. I wonder if that could be our next one of these, Mitch, where we go into all our different sampling methods. And
yeah, because it doesn't, on Gaston, the low frequency, the conductivity is so low that the low frequency doesn't really roll the catfish. We've tried low frequency. We did some jugs out there, and really we're just seeing them wintertime in those gill nets, deep gill nets.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that would be a good topic to touch on. It's just all the different sampling methods and what species they target, because it's, you know, it always it's so we had one comment here.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Make sure everybody knows. Joey wants to know if we could put Henry under the shock boat for research purposes.
Definitely cannot do that.
No, 5 to 10 amps would not.
No, it would not end well. We're not going to do that.
So, you know, I remember when I was a kid hearing about the old timers that would take the crank telephones,
Yeah.
you know, and stick the wires in the water, I guess, and crank the phone and shock fish that way, I guess, on ponds or something. And I never knew if it was true or not, but I know that those phones will they generate enough voltage, you know, that you know, it's not like a 12-volt battery. I think phones, you know, can get up to about 48 volts.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of amperage.
Yeah. So
those things push.
All the boats are a little different, and ours have these swing. They usually are stored here for trailer, and then they swing around. And we've got two of them at the front of the boat, and that's where all the electricity comes from, right there. And we'll have someone driving and someone up here netting.
And North Carolina is one of the only states that allows that hand crank. I believe the Lower Cape Fear and the Lumber River, it's legal to hand crank. Most everywhere else, electrofishing is illegal unless you have a scientific sampling permit.
I didn't know that it was legal anywhere.
Yeah, good point, David.
Yeah, because you know, the flathead and blue catfish are invasive and hurting the sunfish populations down there. So they want people to harvest as many of them as they can. And so they opened it up to hand crank.
But it's only certain stretches, right?
Yeah, that is true. You gotta check the regs before you just go out and start cranking the water. But
yeah, I'll see if I can find it right now. I've got the regs book.
I know it's on the Lumber River, and it might be one of the tributaries of the Cape Fear. But I know for sure Lower Lumber was where they were having flatheads were really hurting the red breast population down there. And they opened it up to hand crank to see if they can increase that mortality.
It says you can never exceed 300 volts with a hand crank unit if you use one. Special devices, seasons.
Yeah, that's just a cool different way to fish if you're into it.
Well, is that
now,
all?
Does that speak to hand cranking to actually capture the fish? So you shouldn't have a hand crank on the boat whatsoever, right? Like if it's not legal at Jordan, don't get caught with one.
No.
Don't
ever do it outside of those stretches down in the Cape Fear.
Because one guy said, "How about doing it just for fun?" So I'm assuming he was asking, like, if I go hand crank it, Jordan, just to see what fish come up. So
no, you would
absolutely not.
Would call pretty quick on you if they saw that happening.
Absolutely not. Only in those certain. And I'm trying to find it. This book is so dense.
The one thing I always say is, you know, the game wardens probably have the most power of any law enforcement agent in North Carolina.
That's
They're
right.
the only ones that can confiscate your truck or your boat on site.
And they don't need a warrant to
no probable call. Yeah, no warrant. Your probable cause is you're fishing. You know? So,
and normally they see you before you see them. That's what I tell all my friends that want to get by without a license is They're like, "Oh, I'll just put the rod down if I see him coming." I'm like, "We'll have been watching you for a while before."
That's
that.
right. They sit in the trees with the binoculars, and the one guy did say he was just saying that for sticking Henry under the boat for fun. So.
I can't find it right off, but it's in our regs book somewhere.
Yeah,
So if you want to go down there and do that, check those regs for sure.
So Jason says he's seen two guys in a John boat on the Tar River with a pedal style electro. So like a pedal crank.
I don't think the tar's included, so that was definitely illegal.
No, it's not unless WRC doesn't give out scientific sampling permits unless it was AWD out there. Our non-game guys, that was illegal.
Yeah, Jason, does that mean pedaling like pedaling a bike, or like a pedal that we use to engage our generators? Maybe he'll respond.
So I read it like it was a pedal style. It was a homemade.
Yeah, that's definitely illegal. So if you ever see that, make sure you call that whatever county game warden you're in, for sure. Because unless you're in the Cape, those whatever stretches of the Cape Fear, it's illegal outside of that.
Well, I assume you had some more on the bait fish, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't want to get too far down the rat hole that we.
Any recommendations for good books or articles? Brian, that's a loaded question, man. Maybe we can get to that at the end. So gizzard shad are got to be our number in D5. I don't know about D3, David, but gizzard shad are got to be our number one in D5. They're in the same family as herring, but not the same genus. If you think all the way back to your intro biology in high school, it's family, genus, species. So they're in that same family of fish as herring, but they're not the same genus or species. And they get 8 inches by 4 years, so they're pretty fast-growing shad. And I'd say 4 to 7 here. They could probably get 9, but I bet most gizzard shad are only making it 4 to 7 years in North Carolina, especially Jordan. And they spawn in early summer, so they're spawning later than your threadfin are, and they're spawning in different places. They're usually in the backs of coves. And it's not usually as big of a deal, fishing a gizzard shad spawn is not usually as big of a thing. And they thrive in that warm, dirty water. So you can name a lake in North Carolina, and it meets both of those criteria. And they're eating those plankton. So if you think back to biology again in high school, those plankton that are, just at the mercy of the wind, that's what those shad are feeding on. They're swimming around, just filtering those plankton out of the water. They're considered a planktivorous fish. And some people will call them a mud shad. They love flow and they like easy feeding. So that's why your wind currents, when your wind's blowing up on a bank, and your any current, strong current's gonna really put them shad around those winds, because the plankton are blowing and the shad are falling right behind to eat the plankton out of the water. And that's why rain events can be real key. So sometimes right after a rain, people will run all the way up a river. And it's probably because all the gizzard shad are going up there to eat the plankton that are flowing down in the flood. And that's why everybody says muddy lakes fish shallower, right? The muddier the water, the shallower you usually want to fish for largemouth. And that's because UV light is important for all their food sources. So if that light's not getting very deep, the shad don't have anything to eat where that light's not penetrating. So that's always important to remember. If gizzard shad's your top forage, then always remember that light penetration into the water is really important for gizzard shad. And we'll just jump right into shad behavior here. So I'm from South Carolina. Most of my hours on the lake are on South Carolina lakes, especially since I've, got more responsibilities at work now. I don't get a ton of fishing time in North Carolina. So I chose my home lake, which is a lake called Lake Greenwood down in the Reedy River basin of South Carolina, to go through my memory bank of how shad can move at different times and different situations. So like we said, wind is really critical to where the shad are going to be, because that's where the plankton are going to be blowing. So if that dominant wind's out of the west, all of your banks on the eastern side of the lake are going to be better than the western banks. Because if that wind's blowing and chugging for days and days and days, all the plankton are going to blow, and the shad are going to be over there eating the plankton. So anytime we got, a strong pre-front wind, all the shad would be on this side of the lake down here. And, you'd go up the lake, and then all the boats would be fishing the right side, not the left, because the wind would be blowing that way. So that's why people say the wind is your friend. That's because the wind's blowing the plankton and the shad are following the plankton. So that's the science behind why wind is your friend for sure, if the bass are feeding. And rain events can be really important for gizzard shad because the rain's going to start falling like crazy and running off the land, and the water's going. This is where the mud shad comes into play. The water in the upper part of the lake gets muddy and starts flowing. So all these plankton are getting pushed downstream, and the shad are going to be right here to intercept them. So there's two major feeders of Lake Greenwood that flow in right here at Twin Rivers. And anytime you got a big rain, this right here where the rivers come together was always a good spot to fish. So the equivalent at Jordan would probably be right there where the Hall meets that other arm at the dam. I imagine that's a good spot to fish when there's, a lot of rain. If you can dodge all the stumps down there. It's a whole nother ballgame at Jordan, I guess. So drought is always key to split up the shad. So when you have a drought, your plankton start to die off a little bit. There's not as much food for the shad to eat. In a drought, that's when your shad will start to get a little more sluggish and not move around feeding as much. So that's when they'll get real tight to those laydowns up the river and, wood in the water. They'll get real tight to that during a drought. And, they'll suspend under a dock and just chill out if there's not a lot of plankton to eat during a drought. The plankton can ebb and flow based on many different things. And they're just always chasing those plankton. And the bass are not far behind. Depending on what the bass are doing, the spawn will interrupt that, but then they'll usually go right back to eating.
I don't know. Blame it on SpongeBob, maybe, but I just always thought plankton were salt water. I never realized. I'm googling it now and reading about it, but I didn't realize plankton was a freshwater thing. So
yeah. So there's diatoms to throw into that mix too, and that's what them shad are after, is all them plankton in the water.
Shows how much I paid attention in biology in school, huh?
Yeah. So that wind, everybody always says about that wind, and that's why that wind is driving that bass movement for sure. And they will eat algae, so that's why, sometimes when it gets real dry, there'll be a lot of shad around the docks. They're probably pecking that algae off the docks, but they're definitely going after the plankton more than the algae for sure. And we'll take some shad questions, specifically the behavior and movement questions now, if anybody's got any. And then we'll go into our crawfish.
Pop up yet.
Yeah. I hope I didn't go through that too fast.
Yeah, I know at Harris, later in the day, the plankton, will change depths, and you can actually see water color change depending on the density of the plankton.
Yeah.
And like Seth was saying, the wind will push them into one area, and you'll see the color will be a little bit greener in some areas. And that's primarily because of the plankton in the water.
Yeah, good point, David. And I think there's certain settings on your 2D sonar that you can set to make it read the plankton a little better if they're real thick. I guarantee there's a YouTube video out there on how to play with those ping speeds and that kind of thing.
Mark says green submerged lights at night on lakes like Jordan. You see lots of plankton and lots of shad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's why those lights, the lights aren't
the shadows of fish moving up on those lights.
Yeah, the lights aren't necessarily attracting the shad per se. The shad are following their bait. Yeah. So the plankton are the bottom of the food chain. Yeah. Cool. I guess we'll move on to our crayfish then.
Crayfish is what I'm wanting to learn more about. And it's like you said with a jig, you are imitating more, of a bluegill
Yeah.
we all think we're imitating a crayfish, right? That's what we're all trying to
Yeah.
do, match the color of the crayfish. And
Yeah.
we buy the little soft baits with the claws. And
Yeah. And it depends on where you're throwing it too. If you're throwing it around riprap or around a bunch of dead wood, like old dead nasty wood, I'd imagine you're imitating a crawfish more there. But if you're just on a main lake bank throwing a jig, I bet you're imitating a bluegill more than a crawfish, because those, especially a clay, like a dense clay bank, there's not going to be many crawfish around a hard clay bank.
Okay.
And in North Carolina, we have more than 40 species, and every year we have a whole nother group of the commission called the Aquatic Wildlife Diversity Unit, and they're all the time looking into these and all the variations we have in the state. And I think they even described a new species a couple of years ago. So that list is growing, and there's all kinds of research going on in crawfish right now. And it's definitely a seasonal forage for bass. So most fishermen know they burrow in cold weather, and they're basically an insect. So the colder it is, the less active they are. And they're probably less preferred prey item versus shad, I'd say, outside of, the hot summer. I bet, summertime is when bass are really eating crawfish, with the exception of one species, which we'll get into. In Jordan Lake specifically, I was able to reach out to that unit, the Aquatic Wildlife Diversity Unit, and they told me that these two species are likely the most common in Jordan, and these are their colorations. So the white river crayfish, they said that one has racing stripes down the back there, and it's got like a bluish white on the tail. So it's not really red or chartreuse or anything on the tail of the white river. And then there's a species that they haven't quite fully described yet. They're calling it Canberra species C, and it's got your more traditional oranges and greens, and it's less brown. It's more of what you'd think of as a crawfish. So she said that those are likely what's in Jordan of the native crawfish species. So I'll leave it here and let people take their screen grabs of those two for Saturday, so they can go dress their jigs up real pretty.
While you're doing that, we did have a question about shad that came up a little bit after. I'll display it here. Jeff was asking, are there difference in migration patterns between threadfin and gizzard shad?
I don't think so. They're always going to do, I'm sure every fisherman out there, or most fishermen know about the main seasonal movements. You get your shad spawn in the spring, and then all summer long they're chasing their food, of course, near the main water usually. And then they'll make that big spring migration up the creeks, fall migration up the creeks. And then I guess wintertime is where you'll get your differences, because the threadfin will probably get stressed out more and be more erratic and move around more to find warmer water. And I doubt the gizzard shad are doing that as much. Okay. So definitely winter's probably the X factor for the two species to defer, for sure. Because I bet the threadfin are constantly searching for warmer water.
Okay.
If there are any.
Yeah.
And we actually in D5, like I'd say 600 acres is our minimum for threadfin. We've got a lot of lakes that are 200 to 550 acres. We never see threadfin in those.
Wow.
Yeah. So they got to be large lakes too. So if you're at Grand Mebane, McIntosh, any of those small lakes, Reese, Lucas, don't even think about threadfin in those lakes.
Oh, excuse me. I've been out mowing the yard today. I got some dust in my nose.
So yeah, this is the next one. So this guy, when I reached out to our Aquatic Wildlife Unit, this guy was the one they really wanted me to drive home, that it's an invasive crawfish species. So okay. We're fighting Alabama bass, we're fighting blue catfish and flatheads, and we can add a crawfish to that list now.
Well, this is your more fighting snakeheads. So
this is probably what you're imitating with a bass jig. It's that brownish red crawfish, typical looking crawl that people think of. And they escape predators easier, and largemouth are likely burning more energy to chase these. And that's probably a bad thing, I would think, it's all speculation, but I would think burning more energy and chasing crawfish that really evade predators real good can't be good for a fish growing, gaining weight. He's probably burning a lot of energy and not gaining weight like we want him to.
So were they indigenous to the area?
No, so those are the ones that you see people eating at crawfish boils. So you can get a special grower's license to grow red swamp crayfish that get bigger.
Yeah,
And,
I see. I can now make out the legend down there. So the brown states are the native states, and the red
that's
states
right.
is where they've been introduced.
Yeah. So the red is where we don't want them, and they're all the way up to Washington State now, and all the way up. I would guess that West Virginia's probably got them by now, and they did escape. People growing them from food is probably how they got out into. I know that High Rock has a good amount of them. I've heard that one of these Alamance County lakes probably has a lot of them in it, but it's probably a good to imitate if your lake has them. But we definitely don't want them in these lakes or rivers for that matter. So if you see one alive in your live well, you guys don't have a live well, so I guess you don't have to worry about that too much. But yeah, we don't want them alive out there for sure. Definitely a species we're keeping an eye on, but they're definitely good bass food too. So give and take. And I will let David handle this part because he's got these and D5 does not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so right now, blueback, blueback and alewife are coastal river fish that move up. They come before striped bass do. We generally see them even before the hickory and American shad. They're similar to about a big thread fin. They don't get much above 8 to 10 inches, and they're moved up. The only two lakes we have them in are Roanoke Rapids Lake and Gaston. And anglers frequently will move them as an introduction for another bait species that they think is going to help. But actually, what we've been seeing is they will hang out a lot more offshore than threadfin and gizzard shad, and push it more into a pelagic fishery. So they're out roaming for the same thing for plankton, but they're out doing it in the deep water. And they get up shallow, and depending on the time of year following the plankton, but they'll actually hang out really deep during the summer months. They actually can drop below the thermocline in the summer when reservoirs stratify. There's that thermocline of warm water above, cold water below. But because there's no photosynthesis going on in that lower layer, because the light can't get down there, the oxygen starts to drop out. And as the summer goes longer on, and if that water above stays warm, we really need those wind events to kind of unstratify the lake. But there's a lot of striped bass kills because mostly it's the striper and hybrids that are following those offshore shad. And so they'll follow them down below the thermocline. They'll chase them all summer long, but they're a little more resilient to low oxygen. So they'll be able to survive for the summer. And those striper, for some reason, they do not come up above that thermocline. So when they get stuck down below it, they'll stay there eventually until they die. And so we see it a lot on Lake Norman. The hybrid striped bass will die late summer as that thermocline pinches them out. The oxygen runs out, and they're programmed to chase those blueback. They'll actually kill themselves with the lack of oxygen. So it's like Seth said, it's more energy for the bass to eat. They look just like threadfin and gizzard. They're hard to ID. Well, gizzard shad are kind of obvious. They got the stumpy nose. But it's, more energy is less effective for growing for those bass. So it really would move those fish offshore, and make them hunker down deeper. On Carr Reservoir, we've heard of, the spotted bass hanging out in 55 feet of water below the striper. And they're probably down there chasing those blueback herring. Right now, we don't have a whole lot of spot or largemouth fish kills because of that summer thermocline. But it mainly is affecting the striped bass and hybrid striped bass in the reservoirs down there in the south that they've been introduced to, that they'll chase the blueback until they literally die late in the summer.
Yeah, and it goes to that, David. It goes without saying that they are, a decent bass forage, But we definitely see the behavior of bass change, and when bass are out there swimming all the time chasing these schools of river herring, they're burning probably just as much as they're taking in, and they're not gaining weight. So that's not a great thing if you're trying to grow 10, 12 pounders. I think that's why you never hear about mega bags coming out of Hartwell or mega bags coming out of those lakes in Alabama that have the river herring, the bluebacks especially. I think they're burning so much energy, they're not really gaining a ton of weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, right now that we only have them in Gaston and Roanoke Rapids Lake, it would be it would not be good for growth rates on Falls Lake if they were moved into there.
Yeah.
So I assume we would see them in the river systems as well, like the Tar, the Noose, the Cape Fear.
Yeah, so that's what
they're native down there, and they're illegal to possess. There have been a moratorium on herring since the early 2000s in North Carolina. There's a lot of them up in the Meherrin River and the Roanoke River. There used to be historic fisheries up there for the blueback and alewives, and that population crashed in the early 2000s. And they're making a comeback. We don't see a whole lot of them on the Tar. There's a decent amount of on the Noose, but the Cape Fear and the Tar River, those shallower, muddier coastal rivers, we don't see them as much. We get them in very low numbers. But the Roanoke and the Noose, the Roanoke specifically, and the Meherrin, there's a decent population, not enough that we're going to open up commercial fisheries for them again. But yeah, they are native to the coastal rivers.
Yeah.
And how far up will they come? Like the Noose, I guess they come all the way up to the.
They come if there's enough water. They come all the way up to the base of Falls Lake.
Okay.
So pretty much as far as they can go on the Cape Fear, all the way up down below Jordan. On the Noose, all the way up to below Falls. On the Tar, Rocky Mount at Battle Park is the highest they can get, and then on the Roanoke Rapids Lake, right at Weldon, is the highest they can go. But they mostly get mixed in with the hickory and American shad. They're really hard to identify the difference between blueback and alewives. One of them has a bigger eye, but you really have to see a lot of them to ID the difference between blueback and alewives. They look like a small American or hickory shad.
Yeah. And shout out to our Frank Scalish with BTL. I don't know if you ever listened to that, but I actually learned that these Great Lakes fisheries got these alewives naturally. So they come, I forget what river it is here in New York. They come up that river and they use the shipping canals and the bypasses there in one of the rivers, and they got into the Great Lakes system that way. And now they are, sustaining in all the Great Lakes. So that was cool to hear of how that process happened. You got anything else on those, David? I guess Gaston is the only lake within the state that has them, right?
Yeah, and I mean Gaston and Roanoke Rapids have very similar assemblage because they're right next to each other. So yeah, right now blueback the Gaston and Roanoke Rapids are the only lakes that have blueback.
Cool. And it goes without saying that they're non-indigenous to inland lakes. We're not going to call them invasive because they don't cause too many major issues other than the striped bass concerns, of course. So they're non-indigenous, and we don't want anybody dumping any of their live bait into the lake.
Yeah, it is illegal to move them.
It's illegal. We never want people moving fish between lakes or dumping their bait into the lake they're fishing. So please, no one do that with any of your bait if you're using live bait out there. And I guess we'll open it up to an open forum here, and I put both of mine and David's field photos with some contact info if anybody needs to jot that down to get in touch with us later. And I saw that about the jackhammer, and I think those when you're throwing a jackhammer, you're imitating the fire crawl. You're imitating those red swamp crayfish for sure. High rock. I think high rock is probably a hotbed for him right now, from what I've heard.
Well, he said earlier he was getting back into fishing after 30 years. So I don't know. Maybe he's tapped into his retirement fund to be able to afford 25
of them
at one time, right? That's an investment.
Yeah.
I never when the jackhammers came out, I'm like, I'll never spend that much on bait. And then I bought some, but then I'm out there like I'm only going to use these on tournament days.
Yeah.
And, I've lost a couple of them, and it just breaks your heart. But I'll just about climb out of the kayak and climb up and lay down to get one back if it gets stuck on something. So yeah. Brian said whatever it takes.
Yeah. And I think I'm not going to let this lake out of the bag at all. I promise people that, but this lake in the background has them too, from what I've been told.
This is the lake that you referred to last time?
I've promised my friends that I'm not going to put that on Facebook.
Give too much information on that one.
It's really small and it gets a lot of pressure already. So
yeah.
But it's got them.
Well, I know. So with me being in Lee County in Sanford, I'm very close to Jordan, very close to Harris. But when we get to the summer months, when the wakeboard boats, are out in full effect, and the pontoons, I'm coming up your way a lot. I like the fact that McIntosh and Randleman and a lot of these lakes, even the ones that allow big boats, it's a limited number of boats that can get on them. But, the lakes that have the electric only sections are, I love these lakes. I love being able to.
That's right. You guys benefit from that, and I love that the cities are really thinking about everybody, and preventing accidents too.
Yeah.
Because you got the whole electric side of McIntosh, and that just gives you guys all the water you need, and we can go with our big boats up the other side, and it really makes
for the longest time. I didn't realize that McIntosh had 2 electric sections. One down at the dam, and then one up at the other end near the quarry. And,
exactly.
Actually, in 2020, and I'll just say since I started going to McIntosh, which was in 2020, all of my best fish have come off. My best fishing days have been on McIntosh.
Okay.
And don't know why that is. Don't know why I was able to find fish there, but but I was. So
yeah, it's a good lake. It's a good, well balanced lake. I wouldn't call it like a trophy lake like this other one is, but it's just a well balanced bass fishery. The other one is probably near trophy status. Yeah. Which means there's a smaller population of much larger fish, whereas McIntosh is probably a larger population of just chunky ones.
Yeah, I'm sharing a comment from Jason Dickerson now, and it says, "Thank you guys for doing this. Love these streams."
Yeah,
and I'm passing that on to you guys. We really appreciate you guys getting involved with this. I think it brings a different dynamic than me just having a couple kayak fishermen on here and us telling stories.
Yeah.
Which is fun, but there's a lot of podcasts and things out there like that. So being able to bring something educational and with some fact-based information behind it, the fact that you guys do these surveys and the resources that you have with the state, I think it's going to be beneficial to us as a group. And I hope it's going to reach out much. I think based on the view counts that we had, I did not broadcast this on our Facebook group because Facebook groups don't have good metrics.
Okay.
But the Facebook page, I can see exactly how many people have viewed the video. Same with the YouTube. So we're broadcasting simultaneously to Facebook and YouTube, and then the videos are stored on both. We've had lower numbers watching live tonight, but that may be because the Hurricanes are playing a playoff game right now, and our base is in Raleigh. I know we've got some Hurricanes fanatics, and
Seth, I got one question for you.
Okay.
What lakes do you have golden shiners reproducing in?
Oh, probably
That's actually
Farmer.
that's a good question because Sunday we caught a golden shiner at Jordan, throwing a MEPS. I think he was throwing some type of MEPS spinner.
Yeah.
And while we didn't have a good bass day, we were catching lots of smaller fish, perch, and of course, you snag an occasional shad. And
Uh-huh.
and he caught this. It was Mark Carmody that's commented tonight, and he caught this fish, and he was like, "I don't know what this is," And so we're immediately googling it, but it was a golden. So
Yeah, and they're most common bait bucket introduction because they're really good bait for crappie fishing. And so we have a lot of them in Tar River Reservoir. And there are a lot of big crappie in Tar River Reservoir. We've weighed 2 potential state records there this year. The last 2 state records came from Tar River Reservoir, and they just got beat out by private ponds now, but big white crappie and big black crappie in Tar River Reservoir, and there's reproducing golden shiners in there, which really fuel that, I think.
so not related to the golden shiner at all. So Rocky River in Chatham County, what district would that fall under? Would that be either one of you guys or?
That's mine, I guess.
So
I don't hardly ever think about too.
Well, you don't have to anymore. But 15 years ago, well, up until 2 years ago, there was an old hydroelectric dam on the Rocky River,
Okay.
just north of 15501. It was called Woody Dam,
Okay.
and it was literally the best fishing spot that I've ever been to.
Okay.
Behind the dam, it was flooded timber back there. I think the dam was like 100 years old. The guy that owns the software company over in Cary that's building their headquarters where Cary Town Center is now has done a land buy. He's the largest landowner in North Carolina now.
Oh, wow.
And he buys land and then wants to restore it to its native habitat, I guess you would say. So he bought that stretch of land because that section of Rocky River was one of only 2 or 3 places where the Carolina shiner was native.
And
the Cape Fear shiner.
Well, I don't know. I think it might be Cape Fear. It might be Cape Fear.
It's a federally listed species now. I think it's federally endangered now.
Well, he bought all that. He bought the hydroelectric dam and then partnered with the state, and they tore the dam down to restore the Rocky River to a natural state. So hopefully those shiners get reintroduced there. But I'm going to tell you, you only needed 2 baits out there to catch fish.
Oh, yeah.
A buzz bait and a spinner bait. And you would just throw a buzz bait through all that flooded timber. And when one would strike short, you'd go right back behind it with a spinner bait. And it was
nice.
I saw a preacher one day. He was on one of the little pontoon style 1-man, 2-man little bass hunter boats. And I think it was about an 8-pounder, man. And that thing pulled him all over that reservoir all day long. He put it on a line, and tied it on a stringer and tied it to the little boat. And he didn't even have to run the trolling motor. That fish just pulled him around out there all day. So. Yeah, I miss that area, but it became so privatized you had to know somebody that had riverfront property to get down to it.
Yeah, it's definitely in my district, but I don't think I've ever even been there. So that's something I need to add to the list.
We would there's an old steel bridge.
Okay.
The old single lane steel bridge, and we would go put our kayaks in there, and there was about a 1 mile stretch of river there that had enough water that made it feasible to bass fish.
Oh, okay.
But they've now blocked that off, and you can't even put the kayaks in there now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, we've been about 1 hour and 20 minutes, and
David, do you want to address Jason's question or no?
I hadn't.
Is it a Harris question?
No.
Well, it says, without nets or electric, who's the better fisherman between the 2 of you?
I think that Seth is hands down the better largemouth fisherman, but you catch me on a creek or the coastal rivers, I'll probably give him a run for his money.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
I have
a bass boat on a reservoir.
Solo canoe that I like dragging into the Upper Tar, Fishing Creek, and Nash County creeks. And then in the spring, Yeah, I have the coastal rivers here that I like to just go chase striper.
Yeah.
Here we've got here's
Yeah,
one.
that's true.
So
Alex.
Carlo fishes with us. You know, he's not at every tournament, but he fishes with us a lot. We always like it when there's a big group of us that camp if we can. So when we went to W. Carr Scott, when we go to Carr Lake, we'll try to go up on Thursday and pre-fish for 2 days and then have the tournament. And so we always like it when Carlo tags along with us on those.
Yeah. So. Alex always outfishes me. I don't think I've ever outfished him. We've probably been out 6 or 8 times together now, and he always catches more than me.
Well, I know they called him from or he called one of us or something when we were up at W. Carr Scott, and the guys were saying, man, we're glad you're not here because this lake sets up perfect for you with all the docks and them skipping things up under the docks. And they're like, I can't remember what lake they mentioned, but they said it was like such and such lake on steroids, you know, and that he would have just hammered them that day. So
yeah, cool. Well, I guess our summer's gonna be pretty busy, and we'll get back with you in the fall and do another one of these when it cools back down.
Like said, reach out to us if anyone wants to come plant habitat. I know a lot of people hate Harris, but more habitat will be better for Harris. Fish is a lot better when there's vegetation in there.
Well, there were I saw 2 or 3 comments just in the small numbers that we've had that were watching us live that have already said, I'll be signing up to help. So, so I would feel safe in saying you'll get at least 2 or 3 just out of this group of about a dozen guys that have been on and off. So
yeah,
awesome.
And hopefully, we'll drive it home. We'll share it through our group and through our resources, and hopefully we can drive a good team to get out there. And it's beneficial for all of us. If we want to fish, you can't. I mean, I guess you could, but it's not. You don't just show up and fish, right? There's a little work you got to put in sometimes. So.
Mm-hmm.
I did get one question now. Don Trail Sullivan is asking, how do we sign up to help? So do we just contact you directly, Seth? Or?
Yeah, contact me for anything other than Harris.
And for Gaston and Harris, shoot me an email. Okay. I can let you know.
Gaston,
and depending on number of people, we're gonna need more boats out there. So just give us a heads up if you're going to show up, and we can let you know what time and what ramp, and then we can put some plants in the water.
Do you guys provide all the boats?
Yeah, okay. We'll provide the boats, and just be sure you wear stuff you can get in the water. You'll be getting physically in the lake, so a good pair of water shoes and some good shorts and sun shirt. And
all right.
We'll provide.
I think we'll definitely have several people reaching out to David for the Harris event here in June. It's just a little less than a month away.
Yeah,
I'll grab a screenshot of that schedule, and I'll post it. We'll keep an eye on it for the Greensboro area lakes. We come that way and fish too. So
okay, sounds great.
Well, thank you guys very much. I've enjoyed it. I hope everybody else watching has enjoyed it, and look forward to doing this again. And we'll try before the fall, we'll try to find some other guests to come on and keep these things going.
Okay.
Not specifically talking about tournaments, but just talking about fishing and educational resources in general. So
awesome. Thank you guys so much for letting us be here.
I'm sorry, David.
Thank you so much for letting us be here.
Oh, yeah. Thank you guys for coming. And Seth, if you have any suggestions, for someone else that I might reach out to, let me know. And I'd definitely like to get some other people on. So
for sure, I'll put a feeler out there and let you know.
All right, man. Again, thanks, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks to thanks to everybody watching, and thanks to the CCF crew for making my job easy. Hope everybody has a good night, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you, David.